Well, greetings and once again, welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is my story where we get an opportunity to hear some compelling stories of the life experiences of some of our guests, some whose names will automatically hit your radar because you have heard of them, maybe because of accomplishments, and then others who may not have hit your radar because they may not be in the spotlight, but they are everyday people who have something wonderful to share in their story. Everybody has a story. I always say that. And that's the case with our guest today, Angela Johnson. She is with us, and Angela has a wonderful story about her personal journey of discovery as it relates to her family. And she's going to be sharing with us. First, Angela, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you for asking.
Now, you and of course we had a chance to chat, and you shared with me that one of the things that had been, for the loss of a better term, haunting you over the years was a feeling of a disconnect between you and a part of your history, correct?
That's true. I needed to find out, or I needed to discover where I came from in order to figure out my purpose. And because it's a non-traditional background that I have, and that's part of the mystery of it, I didn't grow up with mother and father. So it's a story that kind of takes you through who I am. And I'm still finding out things.
It's still unfolding.
That's correct.
But where did it begin?
Because there were so many things that were different about me, I had to figure out who my mother was and who my father was. And it's odd because I'm not an orphan. I was born into a family, and of course everyone has a mother and father, but not having a relationship with either of them made it who I am a mystery. Well, I had found out that, my mother was born in North Carolina, which is where my maternal grandmother was born. My father was born in New York. But again, not knowing them, not knowing, how they came together, I was a mystery. So I tried to figure out things without asking directly, because my mother nor father were, able to tell me growing up.
So when did you start realizing that something was missing?
Well, I grew up with my mother's siblings. So I knew my grandmother, but I did not know my grandfather. So as I became of questioning age, meaning, nobody cares where love comes from at a certain age. When you're an infant, you want to be fed, etc., etc. You go into a toddler, you go into your teens. And then in my teens was pretty much when I started wondering, well, who am I? So I rebelled, as children do when they don't understand. And then when I came back to myself, I had to figure out who this self was. So it started probably in my late teens, and then I really began delving probably in my 40s and now.
So now in the process of you starting to realize that, okay, there's some dots that are not connecting. There's some things you felt like and discovered that things were being held from you. Why was it that things were being held from you?
Well, people say things that children don't understand. And as the Bible says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. When I became an adult, I had to put those childish things away. So I had to figure out, what are you talking about? And why, it was a puzzle to me. Who was my mother? Because she was 33 when she passed. And now I'm older than she is. So I'm trying to figure out what happened.
So you never had an opportunity to have a relationship with your mother?
No. My mother she had a lot of things that I couldn't understand as a child. So in the single digits, which was basically the last time I saw her, since she was only 18 when she had me, but she was 33 when she passed away, and I found out it was a chronic pancreatitis. So again, not knowing from where I came from, because I'm a girl and girls
Right.
tend to emulate their mother, I had to figure out,
So
you
it's
know,
important for you to know something about your mother because in so doing, you actually discover something about yourself.
correct. I mean, people say that women nurture, and I'm a grandmother now, so it's easier for me to see and understand that. But when I was a little girl, you play with dolls, but you don't understand what nurturing a human, a real person is. And in my motherhood and then grandmotherhood, I had to figure out a lot of things that I didn't understand. Nobody to copy.
So where did that journey take you? Where did it take you? Not only in your search, but also in your emotional and psychological well-being, because I would presume that it had an impact on you emotionally and psychologically.
Well, I learned the feeling of insecure security, of course, because again, I didn't grow up with my mother, and
Okay.
I didn't grow up with my father, and I didn't understand, what happened to her until I came across her death certificate. It took me a bit of researching to go through the archives to figure out when she died, why she died. When I graduated from high school, of course, that's a milestone. And then people began to say, "Oh, your parents must be proud of you." Well, you hear that, and
Wow.
and I talk about whispers a lot as connected to my story. When you hear that, it's not about what they mean from it. I'm sure everybody meant well, but it wasn't true. How could she be proud of me? She didn't know me. I didn't know her. I didn't know my father. He didn't know me. Why was that? Was I so bad? What was wrong with me? So I had to turn
Right.
myself inside out, upside down to figure out who, what, where, and why. And this is like breaking the fourth wall, because you don't know what questions to ask, and you don't know where to find the answers because you don't know what questions to ask.
So
So
you
as
found so you found your mother's. You did your personal research and found your mother's certificate, which gave you some information. Where did you go from there?
I had to find out her birth certificate. I had to try to put together a family tree, and more recently, I went through Ancestry.com to figure out, who my genetic makeup is. So finding out
So I
my
mean, you didn't even have a connection with the rest of the family from your mother's side.
And that's the part where the whispers come in, because there are things that we claim are taboo to talk about. Um,
Sure.
so I discuss more of like a mental illness that's undiagnosed, because I, as a child, couldn't be her physician. I could only be her daughter and try to understand, as I became old enough to understand. And because I'm in the medical field now, I don't think that's coincidence, but because I can understand it from a medical perspective,
Right.
I know that it was a mental illness. And the records that I probably should have had access to, the institutions are closed. There's no way for me to have
Wow.
what was written about her, only to know for certain that she did die of chronic pancreatitis and that she was 33, that she was
So this
born
this
in North
person
Carolina.
so this personal journey of discovery is now starting to turn over some rocks and reveal certain things to you. As you're finding out these things, how was it affecting you? What was your state of mind? I mean, where can you kind of share with us where you were with these revelations?
It was a very solitary journey, I would say, because my grandmother passed away when I was in my mid 30s. And uh, then I lost the aunt whom I was closest to more recently, and an uncle, 6 months together. So, in going grieving them, I realized I had never grieved my mother. I had never celebrated her birthday because I didn't know when it was. I didn't know, how to honor her. That fifth commandment, honor your mother and your father. Where's she buried? What am I supposed, how do I untangle all of the things that are tangled in my life? But it was a very personal journey, and it was a very necessary journey, because if you don't know who you are, how do you know where you're going or how you fit into this, world, which shrinks when you realize the part that you play in it. So a lot of things made me curious. A lot of things made me curious as to, do I look like my father? Do I look like my mother? What did she like? What didn't she like? How am I like her? There were a lot of things that I just needed to know for my own peace of mind.
So, what I was going to ask you is, where are you today in that journey?
I had the results from Ancestry.com, and from what I understand, I'm from more of my family, both my mother and my father have more Nigerian in them than anything else, because my makeup came back 35% Nigerian. And there were various other parts.
Had anybody in the family ever mentioned anything about Nigerian connection?
Well, that was the thing when my uncle passed away. His daughters, my cousins, my first cousins, we reconnected, and it hasn't been as stable as I should, hope for it to be. But he had a lot of Nigerian things, so he must have known, maybe from his father, that he was Nigerian. My mother tended to be more fair complected, but my uncle that I'm speaking about was darker. And
this uncle was her brother?
Yes.
Okay.
They had the same mom and dad. So my grandmother, and I don't know my grandfather, I'm assuming that my grandfather had Nigerian in him, and my uncle must have known.
So where do you go from here?
I have two things that I'm doing. One of them, or planning, one of them, because I have my whole makeup. I know that it's Nigeria, it's Cameroon and Congo, the West Bantu people, Ivory Coast, Ghana. And then it goes into Wales and Ireland and Nigeria, East, Central, and Norway. So I have a nice blend inside of me, but I need to visit the places so that
you're going to do an Alex Haley. You're going to do an Alex Haley. Is that what I'm hearing?
He is one of the people that I researched, because her history, his story, her story is me. I'm doing the female or the fourth wall version of going back and being able to do that. And so I know where I need to go in Africa now. I need to see the whole continent, but I would like to see the places where I know I'm from.
So you mentioned that you are a grandmother now.
Yes.
How does this whole experience, your story, and the discovery of those whispers that were prevalent in your growing up, how is that impacting your relationship towards your grandkids?
Well, I'll say this, because I had two boys. That first little girl who looks just like me, I want to leave her more than just, what I look like in her. I want her to understand it and have a value to it, so that she knows where she came from. It is my purpose to do a family tree for her so that she sees where she is and she can leave her mark without all of the detours that I've had to take.
What encouragement would you give to someone who can connect with your story and experience, because there are unfortunately some similarities between your story and their lives? What words of encouragement, words of insight that you could give them from your personal experience?
The first thing I would say is that although it's uncomfortable, ultimately knowing and understanding gives this grace upon connecting everything together, and it's well worth not only facing the fears and the women, the authors, the speakers that we have. We appreciate the acronym of FEAR, false expectations appearing real.
Right.
We're able to use a superpower when we're able to put back the things that have fallen off within us through no fault of our own, and not trying to judge or throw stones from a glass house.
Right.
But to understand who you are and to be able to help someone else, that's a superpower. And I encourage anyone to be able to take that stand and just unleash the grace that comes with it, the humility that comes with it, the compassion that comes with it. Because no, I'm not born a slave, but I know now some of the paths that made me free, not just mentally and physically, but both, that make me whole.
As a result of that whole journey. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, connect with you, do you have an email or something they can reach out to you?
I do. It's T as in Timothy, dove like the bird, 5@AOL.com.
Wow. I think, I know your story has been inspiring to me. Family has always been very important to me. And as I've gotten older, even more so, because similar to your path, my path was one where I didn't realize all of the components of my family. And as I've gotten older, I've discovered I've got a humongous family. 75 to 80% of them did not exist when I was growing up, because I was never given the opportunity to A, know about them, or B, meet them.
And I think that's a huge loss. Now, I will say that learning that I'm from Nigeria, that is a place where griots and gurus, storytellers.
Yeah.
See, where I'm going with this, it was always in me to tell a story. I love telling stories to my son, reading them when they were babies. I love telling stories to my granddaughter. It was always in my history. It was in me. I didn't know what it was like to have someone tell me the stories, but it was in my DNA. I never had family reunions. However, I can be the one to start something like that.
Well, indeed, I want to encourage you, because you have, even with the process where we have been able to work together and help you in structuring your story so that it can have a meaningful impact in the lives of others. I congratulate you for the journey that you have embraced, the discovery that you've made along the way, and the lives that you're going to be able to impact as you continue on, and include that extra piece of telling others about what you've gone through and experienced in the process. And that's why we wanted to have you on the show today. Thank you so much, Angela, for sharing with us. Again, we may have to circle back and find out how you're progressing with that, because I'm curious to see where the journey leads outside of physically to the west coast of Africa.
So we're going to make a stop in Carolina, because you had told me about the museum there that allows us to do an Alex Haley. So I'm anxious to make that trip, to make that stop and see if I can find where we came from. Because like I said, my grandmother is from North Carolina. So there has to be some way to connect the dots even further. And I'm ready to take that journey as well. And I thank you for encouraging and embracing. You and First Lady have been wonderful. And that's a mild statement because I don't know a word that can really put together all of the emotions that go into shedding tears over something that you finally able to put in a box and say it is finished. I don't have to let this hold me back anymore.
That's right. It's finished, but it ain't over.
It's not over.
It's not over. But look, we're over for today. We're getting ready to conclude. Thank you so much again. Hit that email address again for anyone that will want to reach out to you.
T as in Timothy, DOVE, Dove, 5@AOL.com.
All right, Angela, thank you so much. And folks, thank you. I hope that you were blessed in your hearing and a very encouraging and inspiring story from our guest. And of course, we'll be back with another podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, and as a subscriber, you'll get notifications when we post a new episode of the podcast. Until then, just keep on the lookout for the next episode of This Is My Story, because one day it may be your story.